Sometimes this information is a little confusing, right? I've been in it for 15 years, and sometimes it's like, it feels like you're trying to remember all this different information. There's stuff about food, there's stuff about water, there's stuff about air, there's this sun gazing thing, there's all these different techniques and this yoga and all this stuff that feels really overwhelming. So what if I can make it really simple for you?
Yeah.
Like what if today you could leave here with such a simple pattern in your head that you could understand it all forever and you no longer need anyone to explain it to you because you have a map.
Yeah.
You guys want a map? There's a lot of meaning in symbols, right? And a lot of us have become symbol illiterate. So we've forgotten the symbols. The only symbols we know now are like the alphabet. So what we need is these little parts. We use letters and we string them together in words, but sometimes there's symbols that mean more than like ah or ugh. Some symbols have a lot of meaning. Some symbols have so much meaning that they can give you an entire worldview that will shift the way you think and see everything in your reality forever. I promise. The way the ancients, you know, today Dave was talking a lot about the ancients, about our ancestors, and about a time on this planet when there was a culture different from ours, much more highly advanced than ours, who understood things that we are sort of having a difficult time understanding because of the way we're trying to look at it. Because we're trying to use our modern scientific paradigms that are only how old? Like 150 years. It's a very young paradigm. With that paradigm, through that lens, we're having a difficult time understanding a lot of this information. So what it requires of us is just a slight paradigm shift, or a slightly different perspective. So that's what we're going to develop. Here's how most ancient cultures, ubiquitously across the entire planet, transculturally, everywhere, saw reality. One, that the whole thing could be viewed as one big unit. We call that the universe. Right? The universe, that's one verse. That's one frequency, it's one vibration, it's one verse, sung. The universe. But everybody kind of noticed that we can break that into two parts. Part of that's kind of male, right? What do the Chinese call that? And part of it's kind of female, right? What do you call that? Well, we call it a lot of things, right? In science, they call that like protons and electrons. Or in electricity, we'd say something's negatively charged and something's positively charged. When you put those together, you have that totality. You have the universe. But we could break that whole thing up. And we could separate it to understand it better. And that's kind of how we're going to interface with reality. So I want you to take a look at this glyph. This glyph is kind of one thing, right? See the circle on the outside? That's like our universe. That's like the one thing. But we could split it up into two. And there's the white one on top, and there's the black one on bottom. You see those two circles? I think it's really funny. It makes sense to have like a balanced paradigm. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So we want something kind of balanced. So that's what we have there. You see those two circles? Makes sense when you see that eye in the center. Seen that eye on the back of the dollar bill?
Yes.
That all-seeing eye. That's consciousness, right? The all-seeing eye. Right at the center. That's where we want to be, in polarity. If you're at the center, you have access to both. Make sense?
Yes.
If I get, we're going to use that idea. We're going to use that idea of duality to look at a few different things. You remember earlier, David was talking about gravity, right? You guys see how the black portion of this kind of points downward? That's like gravity, right? And this one, what's that? Levity, right? That's levity. It's funny because if you had that information, you were like a scientist and you first had that information, you could kind of just go like, well, if there's gravity, there's got to be levity because I have the map. But if you don't have the map, it can be confusing. You might just buy into that there's only gravity. You get tricked by that. Another way we could look at that would be like, let's look at this white part, which is positive. It's movement outward. It's movement upward. It's male. What if we saw that as all the stuff we get out of our body? And what if we saw this yin part, this black part, that's that receptive part, that's all the stuff we put into our body. So I want you guys to make a distinction here. There's two modes of transport here. One is that, is there stuff we need to take in?
Yes.
But then that stuff has to come back out. That make sense? And if it just comes in, it doesn't go out, then we get bigger, 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 bigger. And if the stuff just goes out, we get smaller, smaller, smaller. That make sense? Okay, yin and yang. Two of these elements belong to yang. Two of these elements belong to yin. You guys ever heard of earth, air, fire, and water? That was before there was 92 elements in the periodic table. Right? Because now we have, you guys go to chemistry, we went to chemistry and learned all those elements, right? And it was kind of confusing because the elements that are really built into your brain The ones that our ancestors used were earth, air, fire, water. Right? Those have been in our brains for a long time. Those are the fundamental filing systems our brains work on, whether you know it or not. Earth is kind of like food. Where's food come from? The earth, right?
Earth.
So it's fair to say that every day you've got to kind of take in some earth. And every day kind of some earth is going to come back out. Is that fair to say? And every day you're going to probably take in some water. And then water's probably going to come back out, right? And every day you're going to take in some air. Right? And air is going to come back out. And every day you're going to take in some fire. We call that sunlight, that giant fire up in the sky. And what comes back out? Heat, sweat, right? So we're actually interfacing with 4 elements every single day. Now you could get really confused and get into all these little niches of what like health paradigms are, right? You could especially get tripped up if you think the whole thing's about food, because it's not just about food. And I've met so many people, and I've been that person where I was convinced that everything was about food. And what happens, especially in these kind of cultures where people are real focused on food, is that after a while they become hypochondriacal and they think everything they're experiencing is about the food they're eating. Now some of us can get wise to that. Some of us has figured out, hey, you know what? Water's important too, isn't it? Like we've been talking a lot about that today. If you don't have the right water, your health approach can suffer, right? But what if you have really good food and you have really good water, but you live in downtown Manhattan and you suck exhaust fumes all day? That's gonna impact your health to some degree, right? So we kind of want to have the good air piece in play. Does that make sense? That's obvious, right? And we also want to have good sunlight, right? If we're cut off from that, our health's not going to develop properly. Fair?
Yeah.
You guys tracking with me?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I've met people stuck in each of these paradigms. You guys ever met like the people who do yoga and everything's about the breath, man? Just breathe, man. It's all about the breath. And then you like see them at like Starbucks. It's all about the breath, man. And I know people who are all about the food, but they drink their water out of plastic bottles. And I met the guy who lives on sunlight, travels around, the world teaching people to live on sunlight. I've met that guy, but I think he's got one piece. One piece, that makes sense? Because there's all these 4 pieces, and if we take a piece out, we don't have the whole system. But people don't have a roadmap, so they're kind of blindly stumbling through it. And if they find something that works, they want to stick to it. And so they get stuck in sort of one shallow end of the pool, right? But where do we want to be? Right at the middle, right? Balancing all those things. Today we're going to talk about Earth, because I think that that's really appropriate to start with. We could kind of look at the elements like archetypes. You guys know what archetypes are? They're like patterns. They're patterns, right? They're proto-patterns. See, the archetype of the element isn't really tangible. It's not really tangible. It's not like calcium, right? We could like have a pile of calcium as an element. That's tangible. These elements are a bit more like an idea, but they do exist. And we still work with them today in chemistry, but we call them something else. Because if we called them earth, air, fire, and water, our scientists would not feel as elite as they like to feel. So they had to change the names. So here's what they changed them to. Earth, we call those solids. Water, we call those liquids. Air, gases. Fire, energy. We're still working with them, but we don't like to call them those names because we're not really comfortable being connected to our ancestry, because we want to believe that we climbed out of caves and then got the Discovery Channel and cars or whatever, and then now we don't need any of that information, when the truth is when we look back, it's like people were smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter the further we go back. And today we've kind of fallen, but we don't want to do that, and we don't want to look back, and so we've kind of changed the words, but you can't get rid of those, because you still require interface with all 4 of them every single day.